I'm going to talk about how to hold your gouge. So I don't tend to hold my gouge too tight. I find that it exhausts my hand when I do that. You don't want to hold it too loosely. You won't have control over the gouge. One of the things I do when I'm holding my tool is I usually get my power from my palm. So I kind of make sure that it's somewhat in there. The Speedball brand is a little bit long for my taste, so I have to be a little bit more careful about where the base of the handle is fitting into my palm. I like to keep my fingers pretty close to the blade, my pointer finger, and then I like to have my middle finger on the surface of whatever I'm carving. So this gives me a level of stability and security that I am not going to be carving into my hand. So big lesson number 2, safety. Make sure when you're carving, your hand is in back of your tool. Obviously, if you have the wrong angle when you do this and you have your hand in front of it, you could slip and cut yourself. For as long as I've been doing this, I have definitely cut myself doing this by not being mindful of where my hand is. So I try to be careful about that. And sometimes it's not easy to keep your hand from not being in front of your gouge. For instance, when I'm doing curves, I usually tend to turn my plate more than I do my hand and my gouge, so that leaves my hand exposed. And when I'm doing that, I'm very mindful about that and try to be very deliberate and slow in my carving when I'm doing that. So another thing to take into consideration is the angle of the tool. So if I have an angle that is very steep when I'm doing this, I am going to dig too deeply into the linoleum. I don't need to carve that deeply, so I would adjust my angle so it's down a little bit. If I carve or I have my angle too shallow, I am not going to carve deep enough and I'm going to be skipping a lot as I carve. So you kind of have to find that ideal angle, and for me it's about a 30-degree angle from the plate to the curve of the gouge. So 30 degrees, and I have good control. I am able to carve it deep enough, but I'm not going so deep that I'm hitting the backing on the plate there. So yeah. So another thing that happens when you first start this process is what's called the beginner's wiggle. And it's really intimidating at first to find that proper angle so that you could just push straight through with the linoleum. And what happens is people do this wiggle and kind of walks it through the linoleum, which can kind of give it a slightly interesting edge to the line. But if you don't want to do that, you want to be careful or be mindful of that beginner's wiggle.